All right. Thank you. Any questions, comments? All right, we'll make the request. Anybody else got a bill introduction? Sorry, okay. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Committee. I have for you today 26 RS 3090. This would establish the Kansas AI and Emerging Technologies Task Force.
All right, committee, any questions on the bill introduction? No? Going once, going twice? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other bill introductions? Not seeing any hands. Very good. Okay, so as far as today goes, you know, it's a fairly brief agenda if you took a look at it. We're basically going to talk about committee testimony, and that was a topic when we did the first meeting, and Eric went over the Kansas Legislative Information System Modernization, or otherwise known as KLIS. There were several around the table that made comments specific to committee testimony, you know, and what we're looking at, of course, with this committee is ways to make things work more effectively and efficiently and to give us the information that we need to do our jobs. And so I was going to kind of review those comments because I committed to the folks that I had noted them and that we would come back to it. And we may have to loop back again later in the session, but at least I wanted to have a first round of conversation. You know, this committee, sometimes we're going to work bills like next week, but sometimes we just talk about internal processes. And of course, I look to you guys to kind of bring your experiences and ideas of things that you think will improve the process. So, so that's what I had in mind for today. Let's see. So, you know, keep in mind, of course, that the committee chairs ultimately have the say of what goes on in their committee, and there are conferee rules for every committee, as well as the committee rules posted on the websites for each committee. So, you know, that's where the folks that are going to testify need to look to get the direction for that particular committee. But, you know, given the charge and the scope of this committee to look for improvements, I think it's game, and I think we can have a good discussion and make recommendations. So this isn't statute related. This is just the way we do business largely. Okay, any questions about direction or kind of what's on the table today? Okay. Everybody's very quiet. Let's, so, all right, when we went around when we went around that first day, you know, there were 4 things that I noted. One of them, someone said that I'm on a committee that got 250 pieces of testimony. It wasn't available prior to the hearing. What's the process that committee assistants go through? So I'd like to talk about that. There was one comment that I noted that said I have a 9 o'clock committee and the testimony isn't available until 7 that morning, and then I have to have people print it off for me, so we'll talk about that. Another one I noted was testimony was misfiled. I assume that meant that like opponent was put in the folder as a pro, or a pro was an opponent. So I wanted to get onto that one. And then outside of this committee, somebody mentioned to me that, you know, when we have people WebEx in, one of the committee requirements for some committees requires them to bring hard copies, and it's difficult when you're WebExing in, you don't have ability to give hard copies. So some of them are contacting their representative and asking them to print it off and take it over there. So anyway, kind of a clunky process. Anyway, that's, those are the things that I noted. Good morning. And so I was going to start on the first one because I think it'll tee up kind of a cascade of answering the others. So, you know, I've asked around because just like when we talked about fiscal notes, you know I see them many times over the years, but never really knew what the background was and how they came to be. And same thing on committee testimony. You know, often the committee assistant stays with the committee more than the chairs do, so they know and run the committees, which we're very thankful for. But so as far as having lots of committee testimony and what's the process that it goes through, and there's some people here that know more about this than I do, but I'll take a first shot at it. So what I've learned is basically, you know, the conferee rules, most of them ask that the committee assistant be notified 24 hours beforehand or sometimes 48 hours to give them a heads up that you're going to put testimony in on that particular bill. And then they ask that most of the time they ask that it be turned in like 9 or 10 in the morning on the day prior to the hearing. So what comes in then on the conferee rules, there's an email box for that committee. And so here come all these PDFs of testimony to the email box, and of course they probably got multiple bills working. So they all come in, they go through the email box to dig out the testimony for a specific bill, kind of separate it, put it into a single G drive on their computer, and then from there, they determine the order that people are going to present. And often, whoever's advocating pro or advocating opponent, can tell them, here's how I kind of want to have my people talk to this particular item. So once you come up with the agenda then, and you kind of know the presentation order, then they go back in to assign numeric values to the bill testimony so that it appears both on the public-facing site as well as on the S drive, kind of in the order. So you get a mirror, basically you can walk right down the page. Does that make sense? Okay, so they basically, there's two places they go. They put it into the committee system, which is on the KLIS, and then they put it into the S drive, which makes it easier for us as we go to committees to kind of follow along, especially on those committees that are paperless. So anyway, so what you or I often experience, which is very nice, and I appreciate our committee assistants doing it, is when I go to committee and open it up and look at the S drive, then there's a copy of the bill, there's a copy of the agenda for the day, there's a copy of the reviser's notes, and then there's all the testimony in the order of presentation. Does everybody else have that similar experience, hopefully? Okay, good. Uh-oh. Okay, well, that's what I want to hear is tell me what's going on.
Well, it seems like some of the testimony gets filed under the committee testimony on their committee webpage, not on the S drive. Sometimes it's on the S drive. Sometimes different files are set up within the S drive. So it's always a guess as far as where the testimony is and where the opponent-proponent stuff is. It's just, it's an Easter egg hunt sometimes, so.
And is that experience, thank you for the comment, is that experience with a specific committee or as you go to multiple committees? Because seems like each committee is consistent within itself, but I'm just curious.
Within itself, yes. But to me, they should be consistent across the board, across each other. So.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but that's why I wanted to clarify. So thank you for that. Representative Oropesa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We sit on Health and Human Services just yesterday. When we had our hearing, we did not have the reviser's summary in the S drive or anywhere that was located while we're having this hearing. Not that that's a common occurrence, but again, should be more consistent across the board in every committee.
Yeah, I agree. That's not typical, and it seemed like the reviser had just failed to send it, I'm going to guess, just by what I saw in the room. But yes, good point. Seems like there was another. Oh, Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's on that same light. I've seen, and it depends on what committee you're in. It seems like every chair or every committee assistant does it a little different, but there'll be a folder there for each year, and then some of them will have just a lump sum, everything in a folder for that committee, and then others will have it by every day that the committee meets. And it's like inconsistent when every committee is different, a way that they're filing those things. So it might be by a bill number, and they'll have a folder by a bill and a number. They might have it by a date and several things under that. So it's inconsistent about what you're finding.
Thank you. And I noticed the same thing. You're right. Some of them have you drill sideways multiple times because then they'll even put opponent, proponent, and neutral in separate folders. So you're continually jumping in and out to get to what you're after. And I think that's what you're saying, is that's pretty inefficient to pull it up in the time you need to pull it up. So thank you for that. Representative McDonald.
I guess I was going to say that I feel like it's more efficient because I have seen an improvement this year in my 3 committees anyway. in being able to find it, but you do have to scroll through various folders to get there. I like the hierarchy of it. My complaint is that sometimes the website for the public does not reflect the testimony as quickly as for us. And when we're, scrambling last minute getting testimonies because hearings are given, less than 24 hours in advance, sometimes it really is hard for the public to engage in a fair way. So I think that's an area of improvement that we have. But I do appreciate the efforts that have been made to standardize in those folders. I like that.
Well, to clarify, so in your view, the folders are somewhat standard from committee to committee?
Yes, like it would say 2020, like a House folder, then committee, Education Committee, and then 2025, 26. And then if I go from 26 to the date, and then I go from the date to the bill number, the agenda, and then a folder for proponents, opponents, neutral. I generally have seen in the committees where I'm having a pretty big deal, and Dave Long here is, I'm sure, going to speak. He's really good at this. So he's kind of the gold standard, so.
That's why I asked him to be here. I said, I'll try to transfer things that you've told me, but if I miss, then I'm going to have you here. So, no, thank you for that. Yeah, to Representative Riley's point, I mean, I've looked at other committees that I'm not on, and it looks like they kind of break it down as opposed to just having it in a single view, which I think is much more efficient. So as I'm going, I don't have to jump around. It's all right in one page, but thank you. Somebody else over, Representative Riley, again.
Thank you. Just a follow-up. And it just, I'm not sure whether this, we're discussing folders and stuff like that, but I think just from experience that it seems like it's very inconsistent between the chairs as far as when we are to get our testimony in. Well, first of all, of when we hear that our bill is going to be read or heard, and so therefore we have to scramble 48 hours. Might be tough. Sometimes it's very hard to get testimony in 48 hours of people are doing different things. It just feels like we need, especially if it's over a weekend or a holiday or something like that, to get people organized together to come in and testify, to put together testimony. A lot of people don't like writing things up, and it's hard to get them to get stuff up. So it feels like we need more than just a 2-day warning to start getting things together. It feels like we almost need like a 5-day heads up, 5 working days or some number, rather than 2 days and then you're there. It just doesn't feel like we have enough time. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I would love that, but just let me share with you what I'm battling in my committee. I have a Monday, Wednesday committee. I have 5 days left before turnaround. I have 6 bills. None of them have been read in. They've all been RS's requests for introductions. So I'm going to have to put them on and have them hearings within 24 hours just to get them heard before turnaround. And so that's just kind of part of the chair battle that we have as well. I don't want to rush things. I would love to have very lengthy, debates and hearings on testimony, but sometimes it's just, we just can't. So, because we can't put it on the agenda until we get the bill number, and anyway, it's something I'm trying to handle in my committee as fast as I can.
Yes, yeah, being a new chair, I can tell you the cadence is that you have to have your agenda on the Wednesday prior to the coming week, and sometimes things aren't very clear. So that's why and I know you're on health, and we get revisions, because as things become clearer, then it's revision 1, revision 2, and on we go. But all right, go ahead, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this just really underscores why we shouldn't rush. I think all of these deadlines are arbitrary that we put on ourselves. And if a bill is worth hearing or working, we should take the time that it requires, and we should give the public a chance. I've seen a lot of shenanigans this year. with a bill we're hearing today on the floor in particular, where the public has been very much preempted from being able to participate and engage and testify because of procedural things that happen. So much of what we're doing, we're putting on ourselves. We got a pay raise a couple years ago and we're working less. Those are decisions that leadership makes and we all comply. And I don't envy your job as a chair, having to juggle all of that. But I would just argue that if it's important enough to come before us, it's important enough to get the attention. And then also, when we hurry like this and we get, a full file folder full of hundreds of pieces of testimony from sweet Dave Long here for our health committee, there's no way we can read all of that before the people come in front of us. So we spend a lot of time after the fact trying to read when I'd really rather come to committee prepared. So the sooner we could get the testimony, the better. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to piggyback off what Representative McDonald said. In the last 2 years, since we've shortened our time here, it has placed a hardship on our revisors and those that supply us with the bills that we've turned in. And there's only so many days in the week, and they can't continue to work 24 hours a day and still not make errors. So I'm not sure that the rushed schedule is the most ideal because it does not give time for committee chairs to do their work and for our revisors to even have things ready. I know I asked one the other day and they were behind 15 bills, and that's not because they weren't working all week and all weekend. And we are doing this to ourselves, and I'm not going to say we, our leadership is doing this to us, and it is not helping with our ability to have good vetting and have the information that we need in an appropriate amount of time to do the work that we need to do. So I don't know if next year somebody might look at putting a couple more days in to give fairness to committee chairs and our revisors, but that might be a good idea so that we actually have time to do the work we need to do. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for your comments. Yeah, our conversation today is more about, the process is not something that I'm revisiting in here, but I appreciate your comments, and I'm sure leadership is talking.
But this is also about process, and we cannot complete the process if we don't have time.
Yeah, there are many processes, and the one today is hopefully committee testimony. Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Respectfully, I also agree this is a fundamental to the process. Everything you listed off could be solved with more time. The issue of uploading testimony, if committee assistants have more days to do that, we don't have to worry about it. The timing of release, again, if they don't have such rushed hearings, there's plenty of time. People don't have to scramble if they're testifying on WebEx with hard copies. If there's a mistake when uploading testimony, presumably they'd have the time to double check their work. I was a committee assistant. I remember. I used to have to stay late all the time. But we would never run a business like that. We would never authorize spending if we didn't have an estimate of what it was going to cost. I keep thinking about the fiscal note presentation we had. So my contribution to this is I hear some whispering about the constitutional requirements of testimony, but I think we can address all of that. I think all of this is solved very easily with the recognition that there's a reason it was done for decades, longer than this.
Representative Esau.
Okay, I have 6 things now, and they're all sorted separate. Hopefully they're all about the process. and these are not in order of importance. So the part about putting testimony out there for us to see before we walk into committee makes things problematic, because we're supposed to walk in and hear the testimony. We're not supposed to come in already knowing everything everybody's going to say. And written testimony is great. It's always, historically, in my observation over the last 20-some years, you read it afterwards and you follow up if you have questions, but it's not part of being there in person. That's why being there in person allows the questions and the back and forth. Because sometimes the written testimony is a lot, and you might need time to read it afterwards. That's why we don't usually work a bill the same day that we hear a bill. We give ourselves time. We have the same number of days. We've just taken out the breaks, and someone pointed out to me that, well, it's in the Constitution. We have to do it in a certain number of calendar days. And if that means that we really only get 90 days from the day that we're starting session until we're done, we may need to change our Constitution if we technically have been out of compliance, although I do know there's an allowance in there for us to vote in certain years to have a longer session. I agree on things feel rushed when you've got a bill, you've finally got it in for the people that ask you to do this bill, and now you're turning around and telling them, oh, by the way, you have 24 hours, you have 48 hours before the deadline to get everything in so the committee secretary can have it ready for us, and can you show up on short notice and leave work? And it's challenging because we live this every moment, but the people who come up here and want to testify, for many of them, this is a one-time thing. They're not doing this on a regular basis. I realize our lobbyists are used to this. People who come up here and talk for certain industry groups or whatever, they're used to it, but the general public is not. So I wish there was a way that we had more time. And I think we need to find a solution, but I don't know exactly what that solution is. So I like that we're having the conversation so that we can do things better. These two things are personal. When I have to go look things up on the computer, I am now distracted and I don't hear a thing you just said. But it's all on the computer, so I have to go look it up. And I'm going, okay, where is it? What am I doing? What am I looking at? I want to actually be listening and not distracted. So as much as I love technology, I hate that it's all on the computer, because it's very distracting for me to be on the computer. I don't know, maybe I'm the only person like that. I think personally that the actual bill, the bill brief and the fiscal note should be something on paper that we're handed when we walk in for the hearing, so we have that part right in front of us to refer to. The testimony, I'm okay that it's all online. I just am saying it's distracting for me to have to go and find it and open it up. Maybe I'd get used to it over time. And I had another one and I forgot it, so I've already more than used, I'm sure, my share of time. But those are just my thoughts as I'm hearing what you guys are saying and what other people have been telling us as well.
Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One other thing that I heard about just this week was paper copies of testimony. Some committees would require a certain number to be passed out when we're trying to go paperless. Some don't, of course. I don't think any of my committees are requiring paper, but that used to be the way to get testimony out to not only the folks that the conferees and people in the gallery, but now that's it's all online. But as we've discussed, being online isn't up to date all the time, in time for people to see it when they come to the meeting.
Well, I think I was on a morning committee with you, and that committee always had paper copies of presentations, and yes, those are provided by the presenter. But you're right, it varies from committee to committee, I think is your point.
Yeah, and some of them had a certain number that they, this year they needed to provide, I don't know, 17 copies. Well, what if there's 25 people there? It's just one of those things that it's a holdover from the past. So anyway.
Representative Droege, I think you were next, and then over here, Tom.
Esau. There we go. We're on. I agree with her. I like to have those bills, and so I can make notes in the margins, Or back when I was in practice, I had a write-on laptop that I could make notes into my records right on my laptop. And I know we can't just change every bit of technology right away, but I thought I'd put that in there. It's really handy to be able to write notes as you discuss the legislation.
Okay, and when you talked about, you mean like a notepad function on the laptop? Is that what?
Laptop like this, and you turn it around, lay it flat, and you just write on it.
Oh, okay, all right, had a tablet feature, okay. I think, well, I think I had Representative McDonald.
I'll go really quickly. I appreciate what Representative Esau said about needing to be an active listener and showing up, you know, with listening ears, as I would have said in first grade. But I also think about being a blank slate. If you walk in with no prior knowledge, for instance, when I was on financial institutions and pensions last year, I was way out of my depth. This is not something I've ever had to deal with. And we get these complicated bills that are reams thick. And I really pride myself on trying to prepare for committee. It's very hard to prepare for committee when things are sprung upon us and when you have no prior knowledge. So even in a health committee, there's some pretty complex stuff we cover, and I don't have a background in healthcare. So while I appreciate the need to be present and listen to people who are coming to provide testimony, and absolutely I look through things after the fact. Having no prior knowledge before really makes it hard for me to have the background knowledge to be able to be as effective as I possibly could be, that's all.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I, you know, just from a, what do you call it? I don't know. You know, I noticed sometimes we have people come in and testify and nobody looks at them because I've had them actually come to me and say, thank you for listening. But, you know, we pop open our laptops and everybody's looking and not really paying attention. So I don't know. I always feel kind of bad for the presenter when he looks around and doesn't have any eyes on him. But anyway, Representative Brunk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Neither a question nor a solution, just an observation about the compressed time frame. The Constitution and the talking about how the legislature organizes itself, it's even-numbered years that is not to exceed 90 days. So that's this year. And so on the first year of our 2-year cycle, it doesn't speak to the number of days. And so that's done specifically by leadership and by how we vote on our rules to establish it right up front. So just an observation.
I agree. Most of it's in the rules, and that's the time to think about those things. Representative, I'm sorry. Who are you? Oh, Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a comment or question, and maybe this is out of line, maybe this is another topic. But when people are submitting testimony, just trying to find it on the website, how to submit it. My husband testified Monday, and honestly, it took me a minute to figure out what he was supposed to do. And so if I, who am familiar with this website, couldn't figure it out. So I think maybe we need to figure out how to help people submit that testimony as well, so.
Yeah, and that's a good lead into my next topic here. But go ahead, Representative Opeza.
So just two things. Representative Howerton is absolutely right. Website's not as user-friendly as it could be for potentially people who maybe have been more engaged in the civil process, and, you know, voters who we represent who want to be more engaged, and maybe there's a topic that has piqued their interest. And I definitely think we need to ensure that when we have their attention, that we're utilizing it and that we hear their voice. Because when things are hard, people just stop. So I just want to make sure that that is definitely something that is addressed, as well as to our committee assistants. If I'm not mistaken, they're 90 days? They're here just for the session, maybe a few days early and a few days after, potentially. I don't know how exactly all of that breaks down. So they're obviously doing their best and definitely so helpful in so many aspects. But this is very short term, and maybe we need to look at spending a little more money to have people more long term and throughout the year, maybe a little longer pre-session and post-session, and to really kind of, I'm not talking about a huge FTEs, but potentially to also have those people help during session, especially in the busier committees that lots of people show up for. Fed and state is a big one. Health and Human Services could potentially, depending on topic, could be a big one. But, you know, having those extra hands on deck could be something potentially we could look at modernizing. We didn't need it in the past, but now that we're very technology going driven that way, potentially looking towards the future and upgrading.
Good comments. Yeah, some committees definitely, you know, commerce you didn't name, but there's some that are much heavier in terms of everyday committees and pretty heavy content everyday kind of committees. Representative Riley, you had something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just maybe I have two A and B here, so they're not connected exactly. But if you had a chance to go around to any other states, and I just thinking of trying to think out of the box, there are other states that, like the Education Committee, they meet on, let's just say, Thursday, such and such a day, 8 o'clock till whenever they're done. And so they have, everybody comes in and brings all their bills in, and they have all testimony on all one day, and till they're done. Could be 10 o'clock at night. They take breaks, but all day. Not an hour and a half, all day. And so all the lobbyists know that this is the day that they're meeting. Everybody that's making testimony knows that that's the day that they're meeting. They meet all day. The other part B of that is and this is for us, and then is it feels like we've started to do this, but it feels like we need to have more joint committees because all of the, particularly in the budget committees, that we have people from all the different administrative agencies and everything. They come in and they talk to the Senate, they come and talk to us, then they talk to appropriations, then they go back and talk ways and means. They just need to come and talk to one committee, and then they need to talk to appropriations, and then Ways and Means can take whatever we give them. That's a biased. But the point is, there is so many times that these different agencies, especially in budget committees, and you could almost pull that through a little bit on major policy, but there are policies that I can't blame this on any particular group, but there are groups that will put exactly the same bill in for the House and for the Senate and then roll the dice. And feels like that type of a bill or whatever should be controlled, and they make a decision, is it going to go to the House or going to go to the Senate, and let that go. Instead, we don't have all these dual bills. Thank you.
Yes, and I think they're cracked down on that this year. I think they're catching the fact that it's in both.
Chair, I think it's the revisers that should have some control over that. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess my thought on that is the reviser can't tell you that somebody else is working on a bill. Someone else over here. Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just kind of want to revisit the time thing again. You know, I just don't think it's very forward-thinking for us to look at a legislature that started back in the 1860s. I don't have no idea what the population was at that time, but certainly it's going to take longer to legislate for 2 million than it will 2. So as so as our population has grown, our legislature has grown, the amount of time that it takes to get it done, albeit that we do have modernization techniques. You know, we have computers now, and we're no longer using, you know, the rock and the chisel to write things down. However, you know, since I've been here, you know, this is a rush. This is a race, right? If this was any one of the many numerous businesses that I've had in the past, and present, and I attempted to run it this way, it would be absolute ridiculousness, and I would just quit. There's no way that we can do it effectively in the time that we have. And keeping in mind that this isn't someone else's money that I'm spending. This is my money. And when I'm spending my money, I'm going to spend my money in the most effective way possible. And if you don't feel that way about the people that you represent, then you should probably be in another job. Thank you.
All right. Not seeing any more hands, but good comments, and I appreciate all the input. And again, I'm going to try to bring it back just to testimony here. So I had described the process, and largely, as we know, then of course those committee assistants are also getting people that are popping into the office to have an appointment with someone, or answering the phone, or getting ready for committee and setting it up. So they're doing the things that I described amongst all their other responsibilities for the day. So it is, in terms of when is it available, you know, if you get a 250 pieces of testimony, it's a lot to get done. Most committees don't have that much, of course, but anyway, those are my thoughts on that. And then the question on mismarked testimony, again, I'm assuming that I have seen, as I read through testimony, that people miscategorize it because it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound like a proponent. You follow? So I really don't know the nuances of that particular thing that you raised, or if that's been resolved, but it seems like if it was misclassified that it would have been remedied. But you can see, I guess, based on all that they go through, that it could happen, but it should be correctable. And then as far as why can't the testimony be accessed earlier, you know, again, we've heard a lot of comments about that. The chairs, you know, ultimately are the ones that decide how things run in their committee. But we did talk, you know, I think there's a couple of avenues that we can make, and I'm trying to pick things for this committee that we can actually get something positive done in the window that we have before the end of session here. And I think, you know, there are a lot of best practices as I look across the committees. As has been pointed out, the experiences are very different. And, you know, even sharing of best practices across those committees, I think would help both us and probably help the committee assistants. And then I also, you know, wondered about and spoke with Tom Day about it, you know, could there be an online way to put in committee testimony and just take this out of the email, copy to file, move it here, move it here? So somebody that's interested in providing testimony then would go, I don't know, it's an online screen. You put in the bill number, and it could verify that that bill's actually in that committee, so you know you're in the right spot. What's the date of the hearing? You know, are you a pro? You know, so then it could actually be, provide basically a portal for them to upload it on their own. And I kind of kicked that around, and I don't know if you want to speak to that, because I heard initially maybe it's in phase 2 of KLIS, which kind of concerned me since we can't get phase 1, but, or possibly we can do some kind of an application. Is there any, I don't know if I see Eric and Tom here, I don't know, I hate to put you on the spot, but anything to offer and possibility of having some way to maybe online entry of testimony?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Eric Teal, the Director of Application Services, and kind of one of them behind the committee system. Yes, we could do an online portal type situation where folks could upload it. We'd have to design it and talk with some folks in our revisor's office for some of the legalities as far as when and how testimony can be uploaded, when it becomes public record, and there are a lot of little questions and things like that that we have to keep in mind. But yeah, we can design a portal that they can do exactly what you were talking about. Log in, not log in, access the website, enter their information, upload the document, hit submit, and it would go to a location that the committee assistant for that committee could then parse out, you know, is it really legitimate testimony that was uploaded? Is it really for this bill? Is it for this committee even? And just, there are a lot of little things back there that they would still have to take care of manually.
Okay, and yeah, it was a thought because it just seemed like this is a fairly manual emails, copy them over here, and I just thought it could maybe get there more
And
automatically.
it does not necessarily have to wait until KLIS 2.0 is done to start designing and getting that implemented. They're tied together, but separate enough that we could do both, so.
And yeah, I'm not, even short of that, I think the best practice is a nearer term. Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, do you know, are the rules about release of information to the public, is that in statute? Could we change that?
That would be a reviser's question, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Representative Simmons, the way that that's kind of governed is under the Kansas Open Records Act. So once a document is distributed to all of you, it is a public document. So you could receive a core request related to that document. That's why we kind of advise that it's best practice that when you guys, a committee, is all receiving testimony, it's best practice for the public to be getting that at the same time. Hence, putting it on the S drive and the website at the same time is kind of the goal. Of course, you know, if a document is distributed to all of you and it's not given to the public and there is an open records request related to that, open records requests have to be responded to within 3 days. So generally, you know, if it's an hour difference, there's not going to be much time to respond to that open records request. But that is where that comes from. It is in statute. So certainly that could be something that's changed if you're interested in the committee getting it, but not the public getting it at the same time.
Thanks, that's super helpful. I think I would say, I don't know why we don't want the public to have access to information at the same time we do. Just my 2 cents.
Oh, Representative Howardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And technology is awesome until it doesn't work. And then it's our biggest nightmare. So I just want to publicly say thank you to the revisers. I know they started it with a heavy load and a hard stop where they had to overcome a really big obstacle. So I do appreciate all the work. I'm not trying to bash them in any way about bills getting out. The second thing is, it is very important for committee assistants. One of the very important roles that they have is to protect the committee and the public against testimony that's not appropriate. As Chair of Child Welfare, sometimes we get pictures sent in as testimony, and we have to tell them that this becomes public record, and when they find that out, they don't want to submit the pictures. And so that is a very important role that we keep in just our back of our minds when we're talking about this, that committee assistance is very important in that area.
Well,
and other areas. Sorry, that's not the only role.
yeah, and in the conferee rules, it reminds people don't put your personal address and information, but sometimes it still happens. So definitely, you know, what this idea wouldn't just automatically channel it out there. It would be in a reviewable place. It would just avoid a few steps and hopefully streamline it. Representative Orpeza.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I do appreciate a double check to ensure that appropriateness is for testimony. And when you said that, I thought, okay, perfect. Because I do love the idea of a portal, takes some load off of the committee assistants, puts it on the ownership on the person who is providing that, which is fabulous. We need to do that. We need to have ownership of what we do, but again, we always need that double check to make sure. Again, I had no idea about pictures, so that's really interesting to find out, and personal information. So thank you for like even just thinking through the steps as we're talking here and what would work better and more appropriately as a standard process. Thank you.
Mr. Day, you'd like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just in regards to the comment Representative Orpeza just made, for the committee assistant to check for appropriateness may be a real issue with the Kansas Open Records Act and for openness, because it could cause issues if that testimony is put into the committee, and we take it upon ourselves, we being committee assistant, administrative services, to check for appropriateness. I think we could run into some real problems, and Natalie may want to opine on that, but we run into that occasionally when we ran into it 3 or 4 years ago. Inappropriate conversation over the WebEx in a committee meeting. We pulled it down to bleep out some inappropriate language. We caught a lot of conversation over us pulling that language out and then putting it back up online. So there are some real issues that the revisor's office might be concerned about for us checking appropriateness before it's ever put out to legislators and or to the public.
I don't know. I guess I'm curious if, you know, my committee assistant is looking over testimony. I don't know how that's a Cora issue, but I'm missing that piece, so maybe. Right. I mean, there's only one person that has seen it at this point, so it's not been a majority of the committee. I'm not sure where the violation is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there are a lot of issues that come up every year that, you know, probably the majority of you guys don't really see, that we work with Tom and the committee assistants related to Cora. Sometimes testimony is submitted you know, anonymously, which can violate a committee rule. Sometimes there's explicit material in the document, so we have to work on how to deal with that. So there certainly are issues, and again, like the chair mentioned, it depends on whether that's already been distributed to everyone, so now it's an open record, or whether we're talking about before that has been distributed. So, you know, oftentimes where constituents, without going through the committee secretary, will email all of you, all the members of a committee. Well, now that's a public document, and we've had no way, you know, if there's something explicit in there, if there's, you know, it's otherwise shouldn't have been distributed, there's no way of calling that back now because it is a public document. But then on the other hand, you know, kind of like Tom was alluding to with the open meetings issue, you know, once it happens, we do our best to try to kind of redact inappropriate things. Sometimes there's really specific identifying information that shouldn't be shared, but we can't always redact that under Cora. So there's certainly a lot of touchy legal issues that we work on together behind the scenes very regularly.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And yeah, I guess, and I believe the thought is of the folks that spoke that this would be before it's ever posted anywhere. This is just saying that the collection process, if it was to move to a portal, would still just populate a place that could be reviewed before it goes any further than that. So I think that's the spirit of what we're saying here.
Yes, that is the spirit, and maybe appropriateness is not the appropriate word, but maybe more of adhering to guidelines or explicit material and those types of things. And I think Representative Howerton gave a great example, like, hey, do you know this will be posted online and everybody will see this? And as she said, people say, oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. So I think just maybe more guidelines and understanding that if you do A, B will happen, and then letting those people who are submitting the testimony make that decision, which again causes more work, but just making sure everybody understands like truly what is going to be going on with this testimony, and having those set of eyes on that before it's actually distributed, and ensuring the person who is providing us with that information is definitely aware of down the stream potential issues, or, you know, down the stream what that truly means.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like this is a great conversation, and I agree we need to be talking about it. I want to caution all of us against trying to censor the public in their testimonies. I mean, we know we deal with really partisan, political, sensitive things, and there have been times in the past when testimonies presented that someone on the committee found to be offensive, but that person's testimony was their authentic, genuine belief. And they may be offended by that, but that is protected by the First Amendment for them to do that. So I appreciate this conversation, but I want to be really careful that we don't, in our efforts to improve things, prevent people from participating in the process to the full constitutional right that they have.
Representative Howerton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I agree with that, I just want to make sure we're protecting the public by making sure they know that it will be public. So I'm not talking about censoring and not allowing testimony, but making sure that someone who submits testimony, especially with pictures of children, knows that that is public, and just confirming with them that that's what they truly want. If that's what they truly want, I'm good with that. But I want them to know what they're getting themselves into when they do submit things like that.
Yep, I think that's a good summary on that topic. And it, as I said, the conferee rules, if you look out there for various committees, they do warn that this is going to become public record, but sometimes people don't read things. Imagine that, and they blow right through them. But it is emphasized fairly heavily if you look at those things. And I think what we're talking about is just making, to your point, just making sure that they darn well know this is going to go out there. Okay, fair enough. Good discussion. I appreciate everybody's participation and interest, and I think there are things, like I said, that we can make some progress on here. I mean, things are moving fast, and but I think there's some good practices that we can share and maybe talk further about this online. And so probably not the last time we'll talk about it within this year. I'm sorry, Representative, do you have something? Representative Schreiber?
Throw something else out. And it seems to have come up more and more in the last couple of 3 years, but where there are so many conferees that the chair needs to limit to 2, 3, 5 minutes, whatever it might be. And I know conferees love to read their testimony, and even though they're warned not to do that. But regardless, if there was a way, because I think it's going to continue, a timer system that's already here in the committee rooms, so we don't have to use our phones to, and then some weird bell comes off of the phone and says, okay, time up. But that could be displayed up there as well as at the seat of the chair.
Yeah, and that is, you're right. That's those few times that you get so many people, although we had some in health yesterday that I wouldn't have guessed would have gone that long. Representative McDonald.
We're thinking the same thing. I also think it would help the chairs with time management, because very often the people who speak first get to speak the longest, and that's not always equitable. So I completely agree, and I think that would be a really nice, subtle way to let people know without being offended.
You said, Representative Schreiber, you said the timer system that's already in here, is there, oh.
I'm sorry if I inferred that, no. But sometimes
your phone,
vice chair or the chair says, well, I'm going to set my phone, and then when the timer goes off, it's some weird sound, and everybody knows what it is, but.
And the conferee continues to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, well, thank you. We will be in here Monday. Oh, I'm sorry. Representative Orpeza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one little caveat. When a hearing goes long, watching it via YouTube, it cuts off at a certain time. Is there something that we can do, like, and I don't know if that's a YouTube thing or a AV thing, but ensuring that the public is, I mean, if it runs long, it runs long, but ensuring those who are unable to physically be here still have that opportunity to see and not have to look for it to be uploaded later. Those types of things in real time, if that's something that can also be potentially looked at and addressed.
Well, I think we could probably do that here, because to my knowledge, yeah, everything gets streamed from top to bottom, and if it gets interfered, then usually the chair is notified. Tom, maybe you want to speak to that.
There are, to my knowledge, I mean, if we're talking 3 or 4 years ago, hearings that are on WebEx, those may drop off a little bit, but all of them were there. They're all there. And we have them in two different spots. One of them's on YouTube, and one of them's it's called Harmony. And so we have a redundant system going on. All the hearings of all the committee hearings are online. They may be a little tougher to search in YouTube.
Even if they go long, the taping continues. I mean, we have an AV person in the room and.
Right. Every once in a while, one will drop off because of the time, because we preset the time. And depending on what's going on in the room, the tech will adjust the time as it continues going on. If it drops off and they pull it back on, that gap is there in most cases.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to, clarify. So yes, definitely it was on Harmony YouTube in its entirety. I was thinking more of real time that something had dropped off during the summer on the interim committees, and then having to go back and look for that additional 30 minutes and trying to figure out to get there. So completely understand, yes, it is completely there when it is uploaded, but in real time, when the actual meeting is occurring, it did drop off. And maybe AV person was new, I don't know, things happen and I understand that, but just ensuring that that is communicated out.
Well, and Mr. Chair, if I might, you as a legislator, if you are on the committee watching or participating through WebEx, you are real time. If you are a legislator just watching the committee and you are not on the committee as a member, you are watching it with a 20-second delay, approximately.
All right.
So if you're in your office watching the House chamber and you need to get back to your chamber seat during a vote or something, just remember the vote may have already taken place and you're going to walk in 20 seconds later. So.
Yeah, to clarify, there's a different link sent if you're going to testify and or be in the committee, because I learned that the hard way too. I gave a link to somebody that I just thought was going to view, and the AV person keeps saying, well, there's somebody out here that, I'm like, oops. So he kept hiding, but didn't work. All right, well, thank you for clarifying that. Good point to bring up. Okay, back to just finishing up here. So next Monday, this committee passed out a bill called SB 291 that was about cybersecurity. That bill was reworked in a joint committee this summer, and we're going to be having a hearing on that on Monday. So that's what you got to look forward to. And that, I believe, will go out, probably we'll get it to you Friday. It's fairly lengthy, but it's just, I don't know, I'll leave it at that. So with that, I think the business of the committee is completed and we are adjourned. Thank you.